Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome to my channel if you're visiting for the first time, and welcome back if you've not spent time with me before, musing away. A little book haul. Actually, it's quite a big book haul, but you'll see why I'm saying that. So last weekend I was lucky enough to be up in Glossop in North Derbyshire. Had a lovely time, even though it was wet and soggy. Fantastic scenery. But managed to visit the Dark Peak bookshop, which was an absolute delight, beautifully curated. A real gem of a bookshop, actually. Very helpful staff as well, which is always a good thing. And I picked up a book for my daughter, which she's now got, which was a sort of sequel to King Lear, which is her favourite Shakespeare play. And I picked up this, which is called The Fire of Joy, and it's a poetry anthology by Clive James, who was a sort of broadcaster, general sort of celebrity interviewer, etc, etc. Very sort of I suppose he was at his most popular maybe in the 80s and 90s, and sadly a couple of years ago, in fact it might even have been I think it's a few years ago now, he died of cancer, and wrote a fantastic collection of poetry because he was also a poet. Very talented man, wrote memoirs, etc, etc. But this really caught my eye because this is an anthology, as I've said, of poems that he really loved and felt could be learnt by heart. And when I dipped into it, I just couldn't believe it because there's so many of my own personal favourites in here. Things like extracts from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. There was what else is in here? Big favourites like Ozymandias, but also Dover Beach, extracts from Derek Walcott, you know, real sort of mixture of poetry going right back to the dawn of poetry written in English. And after each poem, he does just a little sort of, I'll try and show you, he does just a little sort of commentary on, got a lot of glare today, sorry, on each poem, so you get his sort of very brief reflections. So I just thought that's a wonderful go-to poetry, maybe a nice introduction if somebody's not read much poetry before. Some real gems in there, so I was dead chuffed with that. And then yesterday I was in a charity shop in my local town and picked up this, and it absolutely fascinated me. So it's a packet of books, look, it's still got the cellophane on. I'm going to take it off in a minute. And they are all Penguin classics, and they've been put together in this lovely bundle. I picked it up for £15. I feel sort of, you know, I don't know, it just seems to be incredibly good value. So they're all Penguin modern classics. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. And I was just fascinated at what they were. And I just thought I need to share these with the good people on my channel. And of course now I can't even open the blinking thing and get the cellophane off. Oh, listen to that. Woo! You know, it feels really good to do that. They're all brand spanking new. But I don't know what you think. I really want your views on this. That's going to annoy you. Because I thought it was just a really odd collection of books. I think if I'd been choosing modern classics, I'm not convinced that these are the ones I would have come up with. So here we go. So the first one is Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's. Now I kind of get that. You know, it's a beautiful romantic tale. There's the glamour of our heroine. I've forgotten her name. I'm gonna have to put my glasses on. It's quite a long time since I read it. Holly Golightly, that's it. I mean, obviously, you know, made famous by the movie, but you know, it's that whole sort of New York glamour in the 40s, and you know, that setting. I can kind of see why this earns its place in that list. Okay, got it. Then we have John Wyndham, Day of the Triffids. Now again, I can kind of see it. It's science fiction. A really nice cover actually, which I've only just seen. I loved this book when I was a teenager. It really sort of, I'm not a massive sci-fi fan, but I do quite enjoy it. It's very dystopian, and it'd be interesting to reread, because I wonder how well Wyndham has. In fact, actually, I read there's a book of his called The Chrysalids or something, which I read not that long ago, and it hadn't dated too much, I didn't feel. But again, you know, quite an interesting choice. So this is the tale, the story where these Triffids, these kind of tree-like creatures, start to take over the world. And again, it's clever because it's a really bizarre concept, or is it? And yet he writes so well, he makes it really plausible. So that was the second one. I can kind of see probably why that scraped its way in. Then we've got Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Books, which, I mean, is that modern? I'm not sure. It doesn't kind of fit with the other books on the list. And by the way, I have read most of these, but not all of them. Now, I know I read snippets of the Jungle Book when I was a child, and actually I'd quite like to go back to it, because Kipling, you know, has this reputation as a sort of colonialist, an advocate of empire, and I, you know, I think it'd be really, with my sort of, you know, adult head on, I'd like to go back and see, because what is he trying to capture? I don't really know, and I kind of feel like I ought to revisit it. So I think I've read bits of this, but I think it's odd, because in my head I think of Kipling as being Victorian. Perhaps that's me. That's my problem. In fact, when did he write it? Let's have a look. Maybe it's much more recent than I thought. What does it say? No, first published 1894. So is that a modern classic? I don't know. Not in my view. And then, interestingly, Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. Of course, a lot of these books have been made into films. Maybe that's a connection. Maybe that's why, you know, they judge them as classics. I have to admit, I have never read this, and it was worth picking up the bundle just to have a copy, because I intend to. I don't know why I've never read it. I know there's a very famous film, again, which I haven't read. It describes it on the back as a roar of protest against middlebrow society's rules and the rulers who enforce them. And of course, Nurse Ratched is the famous character. I think has there just been a film made about her? So, or him? Is it a him or a her? I think it's a her. So yeah, real exploration of mental health, life in mental hospital in America, etc., etc. I can understand why this one is included. I think this is a book that is still very much talked about. Next up, Forster's Room with a View, and again, modern, Edwardian, I think. I loved this novel when I first read it. I think I'm trying to remember whether I saw the film and that was what prompted me to read it, or maybe the film was coming. I don't know. I must have been in my late teens, early 20s, I'm guessing. And, you know, it's a coming-of-age story set in Florence, Tuscany, about a young woman sort of coming to terms with the realities of being a woman, I suppose, in Edwardian society, and also about the sort of claustrophobic nature of the culture that she was growing up in. So I can see, you know, I think most people would consider Forster to be a classic writer, but I'm not sure about modern. I suppose it depends where you define, you know, how you define modern. Next up, and this really raised my eyebrow, was Ian Fleming's Goldfinger. Now, again, this is now making me think that maybe the thread between all these classics is that they've been made into films. So perhaps that's it. Because there's no blurb, that, you know, as you saw, they were just cellophane wrapped. There was no blurb with these books. Ian Fleming's Goldfinger. Now, again, you know, I've heard of his misogyny. I've seen the films, or a lot of them. I've never read any of his books. How can I judge him if I've never actually read one? I've no idea what I'd find if I did. I don't know whether I want to, but, you know, I wonder if there are any advocates for reading Fleming out there. I'd be very interested to see. But I often think, you know, these authors who have... I mean, would he be cancelled nowadays? That's a really good question. But I think it's interesting to go back and see what their perceptions are, so that you can kind of really inform yourself about previous attitudes towards women, gender, and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I'm quite interested to read that, really, in some ways, in a kind of, what's the word? I can't think of the word. I'm tired. Next up, we see another film classic. I don't know if you can see because there's a lot of glare. Can you see? Oh, nearly got it. So it's Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange. Sorry, some of these covers, because they're grey, they're not working very well against my light today. And again, you know, to me, this is definitely a modern classic. I mean, he even sort of invented his own language to write it. So very, very dystopian novel. It was seen to be so subversive at the time that it was published that it was banned. A very controversial film was made as a result. So kind of understand definitely why this would be one of my choices, I think, as a modern classic. Barry Hines, Kestrel for a Knave, another. They're all films, aren't they? Louise, why did it take you so long to realise this? So maybe that's it, that they've infiltrated, the novels have infiltrated our culture, not just because of the books themselves, but because of the influence they've had on cinema, and therefore become kind of cult films. Again, lovely, you know, again, this may well have made it onto my own personal list if I had one of modern classics. Story of a working class boy and his relationship with a bird, but also much, much, much more than that. And some very iconic scenes. I mean, I will never forget being read the scene where he puts his feet into the wellies and they're full of frog spawn. That will stay with me forever. I love that piece of writing. So if you haven't read this, it's an absolute gem. I don't know how there's a lot of dialect in it, northern dialect, so I don't know how accessible that is. I don't know whether it's dated, but yeah, I would consider this to be a modern classic. And then Lolita. Now again, you see, this is what I loved about this bundle, was I have never read Lolita. How can that be? I don't know why I haven't. I've heard about it, you know, it's been talked about a lot. It describes it on the back as comedy, subversive yet divine. All I think I know is that it's about a young girl's relationship with somebody who's much older. Is that right? Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul. Poet and pervert Humbert becomes obsessed by 12-year-old Lolita and seeks to possess her. Yeah, there we go. That is kind of what I was expecting of this novel. Yeah, it's time I read it, isn't it? 2023 is the year where I should read this novel. Again, when was it written? I'm assuming it is a modern classic. I think in my head, Nabakov is probably older than he actually is in terms of time. Oh, hang on. He was born in 1899. So this would have been first published in 1959. So yeah, absolutely, it fits in. Oh, I really... Do you know, I love these Penguin classics. They've got this really nice matte cover to them and they just feel lovely. I just want to sit and start reading. Oh, and that new book smell. And then another one that probably I would have put on there, and I think this is a really interesting choice, and again, maybe it's to do with film, but Virginia Woolf's Orlando. I love this novel. I became very interested in the relationship and her letters with Vita Sackville-West. Read lots of those years ago and read quite a lot about Virginia Woolf, read a biography of her, read some of her novels. My own personal favourite is Mrs. Dalloway. And I also love A Room of One's Own, which is where she's talking about, you know, women's, the place of women and writing and so on. But Orlando has that wonderful sort of, there's a slightly almost fairy tale mythical element to it. It's set in Vita Sackville-West's original, not her, oh my goodness, get your words out, Louise. I think it's set at Sissinghurst, I think. Is it Sissinghurst where Vita Sackville-West made her amazing gardens? It's a playful mock biography of a chameleon-like historical figure who changes sex and identity as well. But I think it's kind of based very much around Vita Sackville-West because Virginia Woolf had a relationship with her, but was also married. So she, you know, she was bisexual and dealing with all of that at a time when it perhaps wasn't so acceptable. Although there was, you know, the Bloomsbury group who kind of, I suppose they created almost a little cocoon for themselves in terms of being able to express who they really were. So yeah, I can understand why this is there. But what an interesting selection. I hope it's not just me. And it really got me thinking, what would my 10 modern classics be? And how are we defining modern? I mean, it looks to me like we're I don't know when the most recent one of those novels. Was that Barry Hines? Just have a look. When was that written? I think the 60s, but I could be wrong. Come on. Where is it? Yeah, 68. First published in 1968. That feels about right. I think that could well be the most recent of all of those books. I will actually have a proper look later. So if we said that we're judging modern classics to be books that were written in the 1900s, and maybe nothing beyond sort of 1970, I wonder what 10 books you would choose. I'd be really interested to know what would be on your top 10 list. And I think I need to get my thinking cap on, and maybe that's the subject for a video at some point pretty soon. Anyway, take care, everybody. It's been lovely to chat to you. Really hope you're all well and happy and thriving. And I think it will probably be time for my January wrap-up, won't it, next week? I'm looking forward to that because I've had a really good reading month. 2023 has kick-started beautifully in terms of my reading. Anyway, take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye.